Welcome. This is the Friday, and I think we have a new name now. It's called Something to Talk About. And I think today's topic will generate a lot to talk about. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our speaker. Today, she is Brenda Fantroy-Johnson. She is an author, and we'll get to that later, who grew up in Detroit. She graduated with the highest distinction from Davenport University with a Bachelor of Arts in Computer Science. She went on to obtain a Master of Business Administration from Spring Arbor University. She is a certified information security professional and holds many other industry certifications. She moved to Washington in 2002. The Bainbridge Island Race Equity Task Force, RETF, was created November 2018 when a group of citizens came to the City Council to express their concerns regarding racial incidents on the island. The City Council was moved by this event to create the RETF. I think it is important that we start with the mission of that task force. The Bainbridge Island Race Equity Task Force is committed to building awareness, solutions, and leadership for racial justice by generating transformative ideas, information, and experiences. We define racial justice as a systematic, fair treatment of people of all races, resulting in equitable opportunities and outcomes for all. My friend, Brenda Fantroy-Johnson.
Thank you, Kimmy. Hi, everybody. I pretty much think we could just start talking now because I think Kimmy gave my whole presentation. Anyway, I'm going to share the presentation with everyone. Okay, are you guys seeing my presentation?
Yes.
All right. So as Kimmy said, my name is Brenda Fantroy-Johnson, and I'm with the Race Equity Task Force of Bainbridge Island. I'm one of the original members, and we consider this working with you guys and talking to you guys as part of our community outreach program. And so I'd like for this to be kind of interactive. If there's questions or anything you may want to comment or anything, just, let me know and we can stop in the middle and we can talk about it. So I like to start with this slide because it kind of gives you an idea the differences between equality and equity. Equality is it provides the same thing for everybody, but it only works if we're all starting from the same place and if we got the same history and set of circumstances, which is pretty difficult because we all don't start there. So equity, which equals justice, is about fairness and about providing people with the resources and opportunities that they need. So if someone needs a leg up so that they can be equal to everyone else, then that's what we as a society should do. So I like that slide there. It kind of just, level sets where we are. So as Kimmy had said, we started back in November 2018. There's always been a organization or people who are interested in race equity on the island. I think some of it even goes back to when there was protests because there was militia handing out pamphlets at the ferry. And I can't quite remember what year that was, but that was before I actually moved here. Many of you may know Karen Vargas. She's been real active on the island for many, many years. So back in 2018, we had an organization called the Race Equity Network. My husband was actually downtown and he saw a young woman with a shirt on and it said, "We live here too." And she was a person of color. So he walked over to her and she gave him a card and it said, "We live here too.org." And that young lady and a couple of other people got together and created the Race Equity Network. And at that time, we started having these courageous conversations, discussing race and equity and how are we as people of color represented on the island. I know you guys know there's not many people of color, but we wanted to make sure that the things that are happening on the island reflect the needs that we have also, especially with the city council when it comes to housing and those kind of city policies that they're putting in place. So in March 2019, there were a couple of incidents that happened on the island. There was a swastika that was painted on the outside of the Bainbridge yoga house. And there were other incidents of, racial incidents that was happening to individuals on the island. So at that time, Karen Vargas, she sent out a note to some people saying, we're going to meet at City Hall and talk to the city council and let them know that we're concerned about the rise of these racial incidents. And there had to be at least about 50 or 60 people that showed up. And we all took turns telling the city council our experiences of living on this island and living in Kitsap County altogether. And, they were all varied. I mean, I talked about, for me, it's generally during the summer months when we have tons of visitors who come to the island who may not be aware that the island has some diversity. And there has been incidents where people have asked me, questions about, challenging me, really, challenging me and wondering how is it that I live here? And I found myself having to explain that. So that was, my story to the city council. What can we do to let people know that there is diversity here? And so the city council was so moved that they decided to create the Race Equity Task Force. And regular citizens were encouraged to fill out the application so that they could volunteer to be a member of the Race Equity Task Force. Sorry. And so here you can see some of the people. There's Karen Vargas in the, where is she? Right there. Mm-hmm. And, these are some of the people who came together who either were a part of the Race Equity Task Force or were a part of the Race Equity Network, which was ran. And currently, there is a new group called Kitsap ERACE, which stands for Equity, Race, and Community Engagement. And that's a larger organization that I'm going to talk a little bit about as we go through here. But you can see there, and this is just some of the people. This is not all of the people that have joined the social justice outreaches that's on the island. So our current members of the task force, we actually are supposed to have 7 people, and then there's 2 city council liaisons, Joe Dietz and Rasham Nashar. James Friday is our chairperson, and Sue Willett is the vice chair. There's Savannah, and then there's Peggy Erickson. And right now, the Race Equity Task Force has 2 open positions. And the information is listed on the Bainbridge Island website. And you can see what kind of requirements are needed. You have to have your application in by Friday, July 31st. We're really trying to ramp back up because COVID has had us in a position to where we couldn't meet, so all of our initiatives and programs that we had in place to move forward actually got canceled. So we had our very first meeting post-COVID yesterday. And we're going to start going through these applications. We've already gotten some in, which is really good. There's a lot of community people that are really interested in trying to join in. And most of that is due to the current events, the murder of George Floyd and the protests that's been going on. There are so many people who are wondering, what can I do? What can I do? Well, this is one of the things you can do. You can become more involved with what we're trying to do on Bainbridge Island and what the Kitsap ERACE group is trying to do for Kitsap County. But any questions so far? Okay. So we went through what our purpose, what the Race Equity Task Force purpose is. Our program of work with the City Council, we had to develop, a program to let them know what we were going to try to do to try to raise the awareness around race. We also wanted to bring the community together so that we can engage in dialogue. One of the biggest projects that we had on our program of work was to invite the Government Alliance on Race and Equity, which is GARE, or the People's Institute of Northwest, to advise us on different strategies on how we can address systemic citywide racism. And so in that instance, we actually received a proposal from both groups, and we chose GARE to help us to for them to create these training programs around race that we, as a committee and city workers, could take these trainings so that we would know how to recognize and work on the racism that we see that's embedded in just about all of our systems. So once we were to do that, we were to provide recommendations to the city on their initiatives that they're working on, like the housing and environmental issues. We wanted to make sure that when they put these things in place, that they take into account, that we still need to be inclusive, and we need to make sure that we're addressing all of the racial inequities. So how do we do our outreach? We work with different organizations to try to make sure that we're bringing our information to them. So this would be one of those events. We've also had a Martin Luther King event where we partnered with BEMA, and it was really, really nice. It was tied into our Black History Month event. I don't know how many of you guys might have been there, but if you wasn't, you really missed out on a really wonderful time. We had speakers and, I guess I could call them dignitaries. The mayor was there, and we had performers. So it was really, really nice. One of the other events that we had to postpone was our Voices of Power, which was going to be a night of poetry. And that's just postponed. We'll be trying to figure out another date for that once we get through all of this COVID things. And that's, that's really another thing, how is the city addressing COVID when it comes to the people who are most disadvantaged, So we're trying to make sure that we work with the city council to try to understand what it is that they're putting in place so we can let people know. because everybody's not going to go to the city website. If some people don't even have access like that. And we've also participated in the Grand Old Fourth. We've been at the farmers market. We're planning a multicultural event. And once we have it established with GARE and we've done some training, we want to come back to the community and report our lessons learned and what policy changes might have been put in place because of what we discovered with GARE. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the ERACE group, and that's because I believe they're as equally as important. We need as many allies as we can get as far as racial equity goes. And it's, it's not, I don't think we can turn down any help unless people are in it for the wrong reasons and they're stirring the pot trying to cause a controversy. We welcome working with ERACE and any other group that may be trying to work for racial equity. So ERACE is a coalition that was pulled together. Okay. In early 2020 is what it says. And it's a local group, but I believe ERACE would like to branch out for every county in Washington, that there be a local ERACE group. And I've only been involved in a couple of the meetings because as soon as I got involved, COVID happened. But the most important thing that I want you to take away from this is that there is a lot of hard work involved in racial equity. There's, everybody has bias, and most people of color, I would say all people of color, I'm going to speak for every person of color. It's very personal. And so there's a lot of self-care that needs to happen. It's hard to you cannot take the personal aspect out of it when you're working in this area. But what we have to do is make sure that our personal experience does not stop us from working with our allies. Because I've always said that we've been trying to stop racism for 200 years. It's going to take more than Black people to stop what's going on. It's going to take working with other groups and with our allies. And so the thing about ERACE is that they are rooted in those type of relationships and collaborations. And it's a very large group, and they're all committed, to racial justice. Let me give you, I think, a little bit more information. So these are some of the groups that are members of ERACE. You can see it's quite a few of them: the Dispute Resolution Center, Islamic Center, Immigrant Rights, and Surge, showing up for racial justice. So if you're interested in getting involved with the ERACE group, nope, I don't have that. Sorry, I can tell you that verbatim. They meet every first Friday. They've been meeting every first Friday by Zoom. And I do have the Zoom link if anybody's interested. They're having a working meeting today at 4:30. It's called Deeper Conversation, Who Are We at Kitsap ERACE? And then their regular meeting, the next regular meeting is going to be July the 3rd at 4:30. Sorry. I wanted to also show, there's a couple of events coming up. This one is tomorrow, Black Lives Matter event, and it's going to be in Bremerton at the Marvin Williams Center. And they're going to take 8 minutes and 46 seconds to recognize what happened to George Floyd, and they're having the Juneteenth candlelight vigil. Is that tonight? Thank you, Sal. That's tonight. But I had another one.
Saturday.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's all I have. Let's go back to that. So that's my email address at Kobe Committee. And that's the website for the Equity Task Force information. You can find when our meetings are held. You can find agenda items. You can go back and look at some of the meetings we've had. And that's also where you can find the applications to sign up to become a part of the Race Equity Task Force. We don't need to see that. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing, and it is open for questions or comments or whatever you might want to start discussing.
I have a question. I'm thinking about the events that you've been holding, and I'm wondering if you're engaging with the students on Bainbridge Island.
Yes, we are. We are really, we work with the MAC organization, trying to make sure that we're bringing in the young folks. We did have one of the persons that left the task force was in charge of the young people outreach. So we'll be looking to, find someone to fill that need once we get ramped up again. But we've done events with them. We've done salon nights and other things at the high school. So we are very, very connected to what's going on there because we're concerned about the young people that go to the high school that may be people of color. And I believe one of the incidents that we talked about last year actually happened at the high school. So.
That's great. Thank you.
So I have a question. One of the things we had a discussion about white racism and the systemic nature of racism and our role as white people in promulgating it, even if we are unconscious in that effort at times. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that came up in that discussion was how white Bainbridge Island is. And you started this by talking a little bit about we are here too. And I wondered if you might speak a little bit to efforts for us. I mean, just the idea of opening our eyes to the fact that this is not a monochromatic community.
Yeah, and it starts with us, having a presence, and that's why it was the most exciting thing that we've done, as far as I'm concerned, was to walk down the middle of Madison with our Race Equity Task Force sign and watch the people on the sidelines look and say, wow, I didn't know they were here, and it's, people don't normally come up to you and say, oh, you're Black, let's talk. They don't do that. So we have to make ourselves available to start those conversations and not to feel, like it's weird to do that. We need to start talking about it. So when we saw that woman who had the shirt on that said, we are here too. My whole thing about being on Bainbridge was to search out and find people, because that's what we do as human beings. Whether it's the same race, it's what we have in common. And I thought it would be interesting if we had a people of color night, women of color is what it started out to be. And so Nikki, Kimmy, Nikki, she arranged to have a night where women could come together and we talk about the issues. And it didn't matter if you were Black or white, because we were all a color. That was just the premise, My husband even, made a joke like, well, there's only about 2 of you guys going to be at the meeting. And I'm like, no, there was at least 6 of us. And that's a big deal, because I don't care what your interests are. you don't want to feel like you're alone in a sea of people who are so different from you. You know, you want to be able to connect with those people. And I think what's most important is that once we all get together, we all find out that we're more alike than we are different. And that's where, you know, that's where the beauty comes in, when you can see that. You know, the thing that stops that from happening, the real deep down issue with racism, is fear. People are afraid of something they're not going to get, or somebody's going to take it from them, or they won't get the allocate they need for what they've done. And, you know, what people need to realize is that everybody is just trying to have a good life. And that's just what every human being wants. So I'm not even sure if I answered your question, because I just went off on a tangent.
I think you did. I mean, I think the idea of the opening our eyes and looking, and I think participating in things like a race might be ways to become more aware. And I'm guessing that a lot of the kids at the school can also help us open our eyes.
So I have a question, Brenda.
Okay.
My name is Colleen, and I am very curious about the training that you spoke about with GARE. Will that training be for people just on the committee, or will that be open to the community?
I believe they had enough spots that they could open it to some members of the community. But what has happened, because right before the pandemic, the person that we were in contact with GARE, she retired. So it's kind of like we're starting all over, trying to understand what programs that they have, because they specialize them. You know, they're done differently for each city or county that they're working with, you know. So we're trying to find out what kind of programs are they going to offer us, and whether or not it's what we want, you know, because they've changed the whole, we gave a proposal to the city council, and they approved it. But now GARE has come back and they're changing the whole program. So we got to look at that and see, you know, but that's the whole idea. It's not just for the committee and the city. It's for the, you know, for the community also to be able to play a part in this. Because that's, you know, it includes everybody. We all have to be involved. This is not something we can do in a silo.
Thank you.
Brenda, I was thinking that back on my experience at the MLK event, by the way, it was wonderful. And I think that's been like my third time I've been. And what I see it is continuing to grow. However, I was thinking it should have been attended by a lot more people. It's on the island. And while I did see some people, a lot of the people had come from Bremerton. And, but, you know, I think it's really important for us to go to the events that are important to people of color. And so I don't know how, and the other thing I would say is, and then is there an intersection between BI ERACE and Kitsap ERACE? Because I belong to BI ERACE. And I get things from Kitsap ERACE.
I'm not sure. I think that may have been the beginning name, and then they branched it out to Kitsap, because it, you know, they want to be county by each county instead of focusing just on Bainbridge Island. I mean, we have the Bainbridge Island Race Equity Task Force. Okay. Wait. BIE Race is a section of that.
So,
okay. So I guess I got that wrong. Sal, you want to address that?
Sal, I went to a meeting, and is that a separate meeting from the, you know, Kitsap ERACE? And I know I love both groups because they're really informative. I think Kitsap ERACE has films at the Suquamish Church that I've attended, or is that another group?
So ERACE is the same coalition all the way around. And what happened is that Karen Vargas is kind of the matriarch of this whole thing. And so what's happening is that she teamed with Peggy Erickson, and Peggy does like kind of lots of boots on the ground work on Bainbridge with Karen. And so Karen has tasked Peggy with leading this portion of ERACE. But ERACE it's all the same thing. Everybody gets their direction from Kitsap ERACE, the mothership. Like that's how the protests got organized, and there was 1,500, 2,000 people. That was all Kitsap ERACE. And so, and that was also Bainbridge ERACE, but because it's a part of the bigger, you know, does that make sense?
Sure, it needs to be bigger. Yeah.
Yeah, so like there's Kitsap ERACE meetings, and there are like Leslie, excuse me, I'm getting her name wrong. She's a council member in Bremerton, and she's running for representative seat right now. But she's like on that one. So, and anybody I think can attend those too, but like it would be best to kind of come in through Bainbridge and then say, hey, I would like to go through and work on this level too.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Sal. Yeah, it's like I showed you all of the different groups that are involved. So, I mean, and to your point, Kimmy, you know, it doesn't seem strange to me when I go to a BEMA event and it's all white people. I mean, I guess what I'm saying is we go to your events. Why don't you come to ours? You know, just because it says Martin Luther King Day, it doesn't mean it's only for people of color. It's for everybody. You know, so when we have our events, we would love to have your support. Any other questions?
How do we get on the list?
How do you get on the list? It's the email address is kitsaperacecoalition@gmail.com. And I can put that in the chat, I think. Maybe.
Great. I would probably assume that we'll get that in an email in any case.
Okay.
Brenda, you mentioned about, I guess, the advantage of being a task force that's linked to the city government, that then you can make recommendations for policies that directly impact people of color. So I'm thinking one of the major areas, the fact that we are talking about so many whites on the island makes me wonder why that is. And so housing, affordable housing, and environmental issues are going to be key major policy decision-making agenda items, I'm assuming, on the council. So what kind of recommendations have you been asked to make, or have the task force members considered making? Because those two areas are very controversial, especially housing.
The way that the Race Equity Task Force was idealized, okay, was that we would get input from the community, right? What kind of changes do you want us to propose to the city council? What should we be recommending to them? You know, as people of color, what type of things impact us, and what should we be recommending? It's kind of like, right, I guess before the pandemic, when the Madison, what's the name of that house? The apartments on Madison, when they were, you know, going through all of their issues. And so as a community, we saw that they needed our support. And that's what we did. You know, we supported them by going to the meetings where they was making the policy, and by sitting outside of those meetings when they wouldn't let us in. I mean, for me, most of the things that we have been able to impact have been impacted because we show up in numbers saying, this is what we would like to happen. Or we go onto an email, barrage them with emails. So they know that there are so many people in the community that feels passionate about this issue. So when they come up with issues, come up with ideas for housing, and they decide, well, we're going to build, a 500-room hotel on the island. Well, how does the community feel about that? How is that, going to impact the people in the community, and not just the people in the community, but the people who are marginalized? I mean, what does that do to them? So it's we would love to have ideas fed into us, right, from the community, so we can know where we can zero in to the city council to say, hey, we need to look at this. I know there was some recent controversy over wearing masks and whether or not they were going to dictate people wearing masks and things like that. Well, if nobody is emailing them or letting them know that they don't like that idea, they just go along and do whatever they want to do. We have to let them know how we feel about it. And that means we have to get involved. And it's more impactful when we're all involved together for the same issue instead of 9 different issues. What do we feel like we need to hone in on? So I guess what I'm saying is we need to have input from you guys.
Okay. Anne?
Last night, I think that what I was hearing was that the Race Equity Task Force could actually use some help from the community, in the sense that no member of the Race Equity Task Force is allowed to use their own Facebook page, for instance, to put something across. But if there are allies in the community, and I'm really happy to be one, then we can post stuff that comes off the website of the city, or that we can take a picture of a poster, or we can capture information, and we can put those things out and be like a community liaison, in a sense, to the task force. But both ways, we can also, as Brenda was just saying, funnel stuff that we're like, oh my gosh, these 3 things could really be have an intersection. We could help target some of those things that need to be addressed. Because you're right, when 550 Madison first started up, it was like 12 people. And by the end, there was a really significant outpouring of support and money, and it helped HRB make that outreach, and it helped Mike Burns be awake to what was going on and say, well, I'm not a jerk. I'd be happy to do this. I just didn't know. Right. And you're like, I don't know how you didn't know, but okay. There you go. Because sometimes we don't know what we don't know. I think that's fair. But I think opening some more windows would be really useful, and being like a conduit. And, it should be several people, right? I mean, I don't know, Brenda, but wouldn't you think a few would be better than just one?
Oh, yeah, definitely. And I'm glad you were at the meeting. Yeah, that's, we have been, what's a nice word for it? Hindered. We have been hindered in our ability to meet and to let the community know what we're doing, because we can't do social media. And if social media is really the only way to reach some people, because I think Savannah was talking about that at the meeting last night. That's young people, that's the only thing they know. Like I said, they're not going to a webpage. So yeah, if we had allies who was passing that information on, that would be great. And we've seen that it works with 550 Madison, with the 4th of July incident in Pulsebo. I mean, and I just read that they're opening that back up again and looking at that. So, we want to stay awoke, I guess, to what's going on, and try to understand when we need to pull everybody together and go and be active in whatever issue it is. I mean, I look at it like a swarming ant event, something's going on, send the email out, let's all go and show support or show distaste or whatever for whatever that issue is. Because these people, they work for us. You know, they work for us. So we got to tell them what we want, you know, or else they're going off their own, they're in their own silo, you know, going off on their own.
I think it's really easy for people to feel discouraged and like they don't get anywhere because of that roadblock or because of the inertia of a big corporation or the city. They have a lot of, it's like the big ship thing. It takes a lot of energy to move it a little bit, right? Even a small city like Bainbridge. Mm-hmm. But I think when we do kind of organize and work together, we see how powerful that is. And personally, I was really thrilled to see the kids march too, where that was at least 1,500 kids. That was amazing, and their families. And we haven't had this kind of pressure consistently for a length of time. It's always usually been like a one-off thing. Like after Charlottesville, there was that beautiful one moment circle, but then it kind of, there was no capture of who was there, how could we keep going. And I'm hoping that maybe one of the things we can do with the task force is create a capture system, like create, and ERACE is partly that, but I think there's ways that people who aren't going to go to meetings would still go to events. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you. And, you know, this is further than we've ever got with this, you know. It's not just a one-off. People are passionate. And as far as I can see, this is not going to stop tomorrow. You know, it's going to continue because, you know, I'm invested in it, and I think a lot of people are. So.
We had a group meeting on Tuesday at the senior center on like this, and some of the high school kids came and some of their teachers came, which was awesome. And one of the things they said was, we would like to support you seniors, but they also kind of expressed some interest in learning how to keep on keeping on because they already feel discouraged in high school. And it's like our generation came up doing protests from the time we were in high school for the rest of our lives, right? And they will too. And so I see this as a really awesome way to kind of do multi-generational connections. Like maybe we can't all go to protests anymore because we might have autoimmune or not physically be able, but we can work with younger people who can be out there too. Right. And when we said some things like that, the kids said, well, we could do a car cavalcade like we did for the high school graduation. And I thought, they're like, we'll make you some banners and stuff. And I thought, you know, opening the doors to more ideas is really fruitful, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's what it's all about. It's all about collaborating, you know, and finding out what works for everybody, you know. Yeah.
And it can be
really understanding the problem as I see it takes some real education and reading, and I think we're in an extremely opportune time right now to make an impact. And I every time I come, I talk on this with this group. I mentioned the book, The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabel Wilkerson, that gives you a history of what led to all of this and what we can do from that perspective to end this systemic problem that we have. And that's what it is. So I highly recommend The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabel Wilkerson as a study book. And thank you, by the way, for doing such a great job today. I really appreciate it, Brenda.
Thank you. Thank you guys for having me. Thank you, Kimmy, for asking me.
Well, before though we close, I'm going to ask the group again if there are any questions or comments. And before I let Brenda go, I want you to know, can you see this book? This is her memoir.